my goal in any profile writing scenario is if we took away all your photos and presented a group of random profiles to your friends, would they immediately know yours? Like, it should be blindingly obvious to people who know you that this is your profile. And if it's not, then you haven't done the work yet.
This program contains coarse language and discusses mature themes. Viewer discretion is advised.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of The Birds and the Bee. I am your host, Chelsea B., and we have with us, as always, my partner and producer, Matt. And joining us today, we have Steve Dean, who is a dating industry consultant, relationship coach, Substack creator, and owner of his website, Dateworking. Steve, welcome. If you want to give us a little intro and tell us about yourself.
Sure. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I've been now completely mired in the dating space since 2010 when I got very smitten with it from a 99% match on OkCupid, who I went on a date with, and it turned into a 5.5-year relationship. It was my first ever online date. And ever since then, I've been kind of obsessed with like how people can use digital technologies and even social technologies to make friends, to make lovers, to find long-term relationships. And year over year, I get deeper and deeper into like the sordid pieces of the dating industry. So dealing with like the actual makings of the apps themselves and the service providers who harvest our data. And then the end users who are struggling through this kind of complex web of thousands of apps and even more thousands of hours wasted on those apps.
That is fascinating. So I bet you have a lot of knowledge and just a very interesting perspective as it's evolved since 2010 to now, and now with AI. So, but I am just curious how your what your entrance was into the poly world. If you've been into the poly world or the non-monogamy world for a while, how's your introduction into that?
Well, I was dating monogamously from age 10 until age 21. And then my first ever online date turned into my first poly relationship. But it didn't even start poly because I didn't identify that way yet. It was just an open relationship because we knew that we both wanted to maintain our like college study buddies, but also build something together that had more meaning and substance for after we both graduated. And so we designed a relationship that was open from the ground up, and layer by layer just built it out to fit our needs, especially as they evolved from like me graduating first and then her graduating later. And then after that, we went pretty hardcore into the poly direction because we were living in between 2 or 3 different cities, and one of which was New York, which just made dating very easy. And so over the course of the next 4 or 5 years, we ended up building it was a polycule that just kept growing. I think we had at one point 16 people in a single group chat, all of whom were dating each other in varying configurations. Wow. And then from there, I started helping people with whether it be opening up their relationship or navigating various challenges that would come up because I started witnessing them time and time again, some of which were fairly predictable, especially at the early stages. And so now I guess this is over 12 years after that, 13 years later. I feel very comfortable both with my poly identity, but also with the recognition that non-monogamy is comprised of both like an identity component and a physical like practice component. The structures that you apply to the relationship don't even need to correspond with the identity, but they both can be open. So it's been pretty complex, but fun to just witness the full breadth of human relationship possibilities unfold and get better talked about and understood.
That sounds like a very healthy way to kind of develop your identity and really explore the many different, I feel like, facets that can come with just because and if you can define for the audience what a polycule is, I don't even know if we've had that defined before.
A polycule is just kind of a cutesy term for the configuration of people who broadly identify as polyamorous and are dating one another in some capacity. And so if you have like a trio, 3 people dating one another, if it's a quad, that's 4 people, then once you get cozier and cozier with your identity collectively, it's easier to refer to your cohort as a polycule. It also recognizes that there's many different molecular shapes that different relationships can take, because if you're in like a 3-person relationship, but you're not closed, meaning like you are still each open potentially to dating other people, then that configuration can change. And so I think one of the nice things about the polycule language is just we recognize that molecules are always shifting and going based on kind of where the energy wants to take them. I kind of like both the freedom of that and the nerdiness of it too.
Cutesy, but also makes perfect sense. Like, it's a really good term to define how many different things it can be. So I picked up on something that you said, that living in New York and so dating made dating really easy, which I have not had quite that same experience, especially on the apps, which I now feel like we could kind of get into your expertise, because Matt and I did meet on Tinder, so we did get lucky with that one. But
Well, that
with
assuming success there. But yes, continue.
right, yeah, evolution of sorts. But with talk a little bit about your experience with the dating apps, and what your experience is with seeing that evolve.
Yeah, I think too, Steve and I know each other from when I was doing my thesis film at NYU, and I needed someone to interview for a dating app consultant, and he was the expert that everyone pointed to. So I'm also curious too, if you could kind of encapsulate what's been going on, but like what's been going on since that interview back in 2016. Not much has changed. No, that's being sarcastic. A lot's changed, but like
If we go far enough back that we can get a sense of where app-based dating became a relevant thing. And it's not even that far back. Realistically, apps weren't a thing until the iPhone was invented. So that was 2008. OkCupid was founded in 2004. That was like really long form profiles where you have a lot of text. Photos were not yet super huge because most people didn't even really have good phones to take pictures or good cameras to take pictures of themselves. And so it was very text heavy for most of online dating. And then we get into the rise of the smartphone and the increasing size that photos take up relative to your whole screen. Like on Tinder nowadays, it's like 85+% of the screen is just a photo. So we've transitioned very heavily from text into photos over the years, where it's become far more superficial because rather than reading potentially 20 paragraphs about a person, you're seeing 3 to 5 photos of a person and calling it basically a day, because the rest of the information you're getting on modern apps is like maybe up to 400 or 500 characters, which is basically 3 to 4 sentences. So trying to consolidate the whole of you, the person, into 3 to 4 sentences is a very asinine task. It's not fun. Hence the slog of modern dating. You're seeing countless tens of millions of profiles, if not hundreds of millions, depending on how far your location is scoped. If you set your discovery settings to worldwide, you could have 100 million people at your fingertips, but you're really just getting photos and a little blurb of text here and there. When I got my start, I was dating in a 1 square mile town. And so I went on OkCupid. This is like with the open relationship already in place. My partner is on a college campus. I had just graduated, so she could basically find anyone easily, anytime. And I was newly graduated in a 1 square mile town. I burned through the whole population of OkCupid in about 4 seconds. I then went on Match. I burned through that population in another 3 seconds. I went on eHarmony. They kicked me out for being poly.
I hate when that happens.
I went on Badoo. I went down the whole list of every app to see, what's the app that people in my little town might actually be using? And the answer was basically none. So I learned early on that location played a huge role in your outcomes on these apps, because if the app isn't popular enough to have a huge marketing budget or scaled enough in any given locale, then you just don't see people unless you expand your location settings. So by the time I was leaving my 1 square mile town, like 3 months later, I was on 50 apps, and none of them had done anything by way of results. And when I moved to New York, though, suddenly my phone was blowing up night and day. I went from having 0 matches and like 0 prospects to, at that point, like year 1 in New York, it wasn't even just that there were suddenly thousands of users, if not tens of thousands or more, across multiple apps. It was also the case that in this era, you could live broadcast just like, hey, I'm in this neighborhood looking to like make drinks. I have a friend who's an amateur mixologist right here. Come over. And people could see your location. They could see where you're, like what you're up to, your whole like text blurb of what you want. And it was great. That was like the heyday of online dating. We were going like 2011 to 2014 was when you still had decently well-formed profiles where people had to put in a lot of text. A lot of people were still going from, like, most things were not mobile first yet. That was like a Tinder kind of push for the industry, going mobile first. Most apps were still desktop driven. And so you had a keyboard, you had a lot of text space. And so writing about yourself was kind of the norm. That's only been stripped away from us over the years. So the evolution now has just been one of, from 2013 onward, when Tinder basically launched and caught fire and became this app that superficialized so much of dating because it took it down to its absolute barest minimum requirements to get one person in front of another person, regardless of intent. A lot of dating apps previously had wanted people who were romantically aligned or could be like socially aligned. There were some friendship apps out there, like Rent a Friend, where you could just pay to have someone show up and be your friend for the day. But Tinder took what used to be, like, eHarmony has a 150 plus, I think it's over 100 question intake form that you have to answer for them to then use their algorithms to match you. And OkCupid, like, you could be typing, I think my personal OkCupid is maybe 30 paragraphs long. This is like over 6,000 words. And then Tinder comes out and they say, you don't even need a bio. You don't need to write a single word. It's 4 taps. You open the app, you log in with Facebook, you approve that it can have access to your camera and whatever, and then you make a swipe. And in 4 taps, you can already be matched to a person nearby. And that was wildfire. It was completely unheard of. It used to take weeks potentially to meet up with someone, even using like these digital platforms. And Tinder said, no, it's going to take you 4 taps. And by the time I was meeting someone within an hour regularly, that's when I knew, like, oh, this is taking off and this is very real. I had personally invited 50 people to Tinder the day I downloaded it because it was completely transformative in terms of the efficiency gains. But what we've lost is the actual depth of character you can get from someone. And honestly, since 2013, it's now 11 years since that debuted, it's only basically either stayed the same or gotten worse. Like, we haven't gained that much by way of profile depth. We've stripped away so much from profiles because when someone can join in 4 taps, that person's not, like, their expectation set now is not that they're going to spend 2 hours writing a long and complex profile and thinking about themselves and what they want. All they're going to do is start swiping because the entire swiping mechanic was built to be like a game, like a slot machine, a variable schedule of reinforcement where you see cute faces staring back at you, taking up most of the screen. Before you even think to read about the person, you're already making a decision on whether you find them attractive. So it's basically hot or not all over again. And by the time you've made that decision, you haven't read a word. All you've done is taken the most superficial thing that someone can put forth, which is their first photo, made a decision on it, and you're already on to the next person. And so it just became this slot machine game where, to Tinder's credit, you no longer have to play this romantic back and forth social game of like, oh, like, do I have to wait 3 days to message this person? Do I have to send something very cutesy and romantic or pitch a certain, like a very intense date to get them to care about me? Tinder was like, no, we don't even care what you want to do with this person. Whether you want to get a coffee, go for a walk, go to the mall, like, who the hell knows? I don't care. Tinder doesn't care. They just want to make sure you're seeing cute people, choosing for yourself which ones you think are cutest, and then hopefully, if they're close enough, just going to hang out. And so that's basically what ended up happening for the better part of the last 11 years. But the cost of this is that now dating has become, as I said, it's easy in that it's easy to put a body in space in front of you, but it's incredibly hard these days to find someone compatible because all of those core metrics of like, what do you need to know that you're a good fit with someone? What do you need to know about their life, about the priorities they have, about their future plans? All of that is stripped away in favor of, is this person cute enough for you to swipe right? And if not, they're gone, just like the last 500 people you've swiped on in the last 2 hours.
It is funny that you say it as like a slot machine because I was feeling that. I think for me, what's funny is even when I'm in a relationship and the relationship isn't really defined within monogamy or non-monogamy yet, I still like having the apps up on my phone because I do get that little dopamine release every time I swipe. And it is, so I've argued with past partners, like, why are you still on, I mean, we're now monogamous, but why are you on all of these apps? Like, isn't what we have enough? And I'm like, it is, but I just like the little dopamine bursts when I'm on the toilet and swiping. Like, I don't know. It's not much more complicated than that. So it's interesting that you say it's been detrimental in some ways.
And I like that both of what you just said says something about, the decreasing of our attention span. So you have the TikTok where you consistently need that dopamine, and you need to get someone's attention quickly. And then also that little dopamine rush of just, if I swipe yes on someone and I don't get immediately it's a match, I'm like, wait, my feelings are hurt. Why didn't you match with me? And it doesn't matter if it's later, but like in that moment. So I think it's interesting how that has evolved with, how heavily social media is involved in every aspect of our lives now. So that's very interesting to kind of think about how it all intertwines.
Well, and you're an OnlyFans person, so
Yeah.
you get now a different kind of gratification from people visiting your profile.
Yeah, well, and you can't put that you do that though. I recently tried to put that I was a creator on my Tinder profile, and they removed my bio completely. So, and now I feel like it's also about, well, they don't want you to direct people to another site of any kind, because otherwise then that's competition. And even if it's OnlyFans isn't a dating site, but it is another site that you're not allowed to mention. So I feel like there are deeper conversations in that realm as well.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, it is a business. Were they ever in the game of trying to create a different cultural movement?
No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
They were hatched out of an early stage incubator, and it was basically a concept of how do we strip down the way we believe people would act. If you walk into a bar, the first thing you do potentially is look around, scan the room, and see who you're attracted to. And that takes you, in a bar, maybe like 5 seconds to know, okay, I now have a lock on the people that I find most attractive in the room. And their goal was like, how do we do that as quickly as we can for people who are coming into our app so that they can make a decision for themselves of who they find most attractive before they start talking. And then once you mutually find each other attractive, then they open a chat for you. And so like it makes sense in that regard because humans are wildly superficial. We are evolutionarily, predispositioned to be that way. We have eyes. They are incredibly powerful organs for us in terms of how much data they can take in about the world and how much they then signal to us about where we should direct our attention. But the scary thing is that Tinder learned through now, 11 years plus of data engineering and an additional however many tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars they've spent purchasing like AI companies and contact management companies to be able to exactly know who has which details about them appended to which profiles that they can then run through their algorithms to determine, one would hope, compatibility, but no, it's more attraction and likelihood of staying on the app longer, because it ultimately will convert either for ad revenue, but in the industry, subscriptions are by far the most compelling source of revenue. That can be 80% or more. Like ads are nothing compared to subscriptions.
Tinder is so expensive now. It is so ridiculously expensive.
If this is real or not, but I thought I saw some headline somewhere where Tinder was offering like hundreds of dollars per month subscription, and you can message like the most popular users without having to match with them. But I feel like the rate was just enormous. And I look at now and it's like you have to buy these super likes, and it's just not even about, it doesn't feel like it's about even what it was meant to be about in the beginning. However,
Yeah, and cis men are you will not get a match with anyone without paying money into the platform from like a different perspective from yours, Chelsea, because you don't realize that like for the men, you don't get anywhere without putting down at least $30 a month, I feel.
Yeah, let me shed some light on some of these. So we'll start off with Tinder's about 70% men, if not more. The average swipe-based app usually ranges from 70 to 90% men. They tend to log in at times when women aren't even online, which is like after 11 p.m.
When they're out drinking and then they're like, oh,
and then they're lonely and horny.
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
or you're old and asleep.
Yeah. Confidence-boosting procrastination continues to be one of the number one reasons people go to Tinder and re-download it after a while. They have like a bad date and they're like, oh, I feel kind of bad about myself. At least I can go on Tinder and find another 30 people who like me already.
Yep.
The gender divide is one of the starkest in it's so incredibly powerful a force. If you so much as like toggle your gender from M to F, the entire world shifts under your feet on these apps. I think if you look at the match rates, I want to say that the average female user might have like a 40% match rate where, 4 in 10 people that they swipe on are going to say yes. For men, it's straight men over 30. It could be as little as 1 in 1,000. And so why do you have to pay? It's because if you would rather not swipe 1,000 times in order to get one match, because that's the default, then you have to pay to get access to different people. The challenge is, what are you actually paying for? Because if you're paying just for a subscription that says we'll match you to our more popular users, those users may already have several thousand matches in their queue. I talked to someone this past week. She downloaded Tinder in San Francisco, and within one day, she had 7,500 matches. She had swiped 3,000 times. And in so doing, I think she ended up with about, I want to say 2,000 matches and 0 dates. She was overwhelmed and didn't want to go on.
The thought of that is just exhausting. Like I can't. And then on top of that, and I feel like there's such a lack of. Anytime I match with someone, I would say like 90%. It's just, hey, what's up? Hi, you're hot. Like that, just like so simple. Just things that are do not. I don't want to talk to someone when you have that. Just from the female perspective, I guess.
Yes. And the average character count in a first message is two characters. You're lucky if you get a GIF as your first message, because at least that's a moving image rather than a hi or hey or what's up. But one of the challenges here is that when you have profiles which are so incredibly lackluster and boring, where the average person has 0 characters in their profile at all, it's just a couple photos that they threw together. Even with like the best, most maxed out Tinder profile you can conceive of, you will then maybe have 300 to 400 characters of profile text, which is basically enough to say like, hey, I'm a dude living in Brooklyn. I like to hang out with my friends and go to like a couple coffee shops on the weekends, and I work in tech. Like if you say that, like that's you're done. You're out of characters. Maybe they'll let you link your Spotify account so someone can see your top artists. But like at that point, do you know anything meaningful about your compatibility with this person? Probably not. And so what are you left doing? You're left wondering, what am I supposed to say to this person to start a conversation? All I know is that I find you attractive. And so usually people will comment on physical attractiveness, which then becomes noise very quickly, because you can only receive so many messages tied to like, oh, you have nice eyes, or I love your hair, or your smile is so great, or I'm already so attracted to you. Wow. Like, it gets real old real fast, and it was old in 2010. And so we just haven't really, like, as millions and millions more people pour into online dating because they're told increasingly that that's the only way to meet people, and all of the third spaces keep evaporating because they're too expensive to maintain in late stage capitalism, then yeah, the places that you end up turning to route your attention effectively are online spaces. And you go to the ones where the people are, which tend to be the popular ones, which tend to be the superficial ones because they were easiest to glean users early. And so there's just been almost like a treadmill of perpetual and escalating frustration in the dating industry over the last 10 years because it's just trending superficial. It's harder for companies to make money. There's a bunch of big monopolists in the space who will buy out any companies that are doing something nice. And maybe like within the next 5 years, they'll integrate 1 or 2 of their features into the main app. I mean, like Hinge was doing a great job for a while because they let you send a message with your initial swipe. So you don't just say, I like you. And then if someone happens to say they like you back, you end up with this awkward blank, just text box where you have no idea what you're supposed to say now. Instead on Hinge, you could respond directly to something in someone's profile or to one of their photos or video prompts. And so that was nice. And then Tinder now is basically, they took that as an idea. They saw Hinge was doing well with it and they paywalled it. And they said, now you can pay us for the opportunity to send a message to someone. And so they're basically taking, like, good on them for at least allowing you to do it so you're not starting with a blank message, but bad on them for caving into capitalism yet again and forcing you to pay for something that has been free for over 20 years in the industry. And now they're just saying you have to pay for it. And in addition to that, you should also be paying them for a subscription, some kind of membership, so you can get better placement in the rankings. Because once again, like, if you're a male user, straight male user on Tinder, and you like someone today, you may be number 7,000 in line. And for the average female user whose match rate is so high that all they really need to do is swipe 3 or 4 times and they'll get 3 or 4 matches, then they don't need to go through 7,000 people in order to find someone that they match with. And so you just may never find someone. And so then they say, oh, well, you can pay for a boost. We'll boost your profile, but who are they boosting it to? Is it compatible people or is it randos? And a lot of apps will just, as soon as you pay, they'll just boost your profile to randos in other countries, 10, 15,000 miles away, where it's just kind of absurd because now it's very clear they're just wasting your money.
Yeah, I will see that I get matches from people who are so far away. I'm like, why is this person, like, I'm not even, like, I keep my range like 50 miles and I get these ones and I'm like, I know that they are paying a lot of money to be this, and that makes me sad. And I'm not any more inclined to message or swipe with this person because of that. So
I get a lot of Russian and Japanese women. I don't know why. Another thing too is I'm curious, like, what is up with all these? Are they bots? Are they like just shadow accounts being run by companies? Why is there such a huge number of what look like fake accounts? Because when Chelsea and I met, I had a joke for a while being like, I think you're a Russian bot because your profile is too good to be a real person. But I still see that all the time. And like you're paying these huge prices for the boosts and everything. The boosts, by the way, are very clever because I would forget that I even paid for it. I was out having a couple drinks with some friends, went to the bathroom, did a boost, forgot about it until the next day. And I'm like, and then I get an Apple receipt being like, damn, I spent that much on boosts. Who are these people on Tinder now? Because Tinder doesn't seem to be that in vogue anymore. I don't know many people who use it these days.
I don't know many people who use it happily, I'll say. So the answer to your questions kind of depends on how deep you want to go down the rabbit hole, because I've seen the horrors at the center of this and I'm happy to share them, but it's not going to make you feel good.
No, this show is not always about making you feel good. It's about yeah, I'm curious. Go ahead.
Yeah, so there's different levels of horror. So level 1 is just if you're a dating company and you want to buy some fake accounts, you can do it for pennies. If you want to buy 10,000 fake accounts and just load it right into your app, you just kind of define the variables you need, and there are services that let you buy fake accounts. They won't be able to message anyone. It's literally just like a set of photos that are, co-opted from somewhere, and some fake profile text that they use like a random language generator to produce. Those have been available for sale since the early 2010s.
Oh, wow.
So that's just, and sometimes it's fully normal to just, you launch a new app and you want to test it out. You just want like a stack of profile cards to see how does this compare, like what's the experience like for like internal testing. So like there are, perfectly reasonable uses for that kind of a thing. Most aren't though. Level 2 is when you say, like I mentioned earlier, sometimes men and women log on at different times of day. During those moments when you, like, let's assume that most of the women aren't paying, most of the men are, which is common in the industry. If these men aren't finding people to talk to, they'll leave. They'll never pay for an upgraded membership or maintain their membership. And so there's an entire term within the industry called animation, which is when you're making the experience on your platform seem more animated, more full of life. And you can pay firms, which consist that they'll basically outsource the role of being a live person on your platform to some rando. It could be in Eastern Europe, it could be Southeast Asia, and that person may be managing upwards of 20 separate female accounts, pretending to be them and messaging people through their own basically like a distribution interface. They'll see, like, they can see the conversations that this user is having across every different person. When they clock in, they're like, okay, this person's messaging me. I just jump right into the conversation. And then they just keep doing that. That's their whole job. And then when they clock out, someone else clocks in to be that person. So it's kind of just an ongoing, let's fill our entire platform with as many fake users as we need to respond to the demands of these real users who might pay us one day. And the ROI on that can be decently high because you end up having more people either stay subscribed or subscribe in the first place because they sense activity, even if it's not real. This is very common on the like foreign bride services. So anytime you see a like, I don't know, like Russian or Asian bride vibe, like it's very frequently the case that you're not talking to that person, you're talking to someone managing their profile. To their credit, to some degree, those profiles can be of real humans. Like it's not like everything's fake. Usually they'll offer like a free modeling shoot to someone in exchange for use of their photos. And then if their, paid liaison starts messaging some dude who's like, "Hey, I want to like meet you," then they have to go track down that model and be like, "Hey, so there's this random dude on our platform who wants to meet you. If we set everything up, do you care to do it? Like, he's willing to pay $5,000 to do it." And then they'll be like, "Well then, yeah, I'll go on a date for that." Like whatever they'll end up paying. So like that's kind of another layer of the animation of like who is this user on the platform who may or may not be fake. Then you have, well, this is where it gets like kind of techno dystopian. I met someone she was building a product for A/B testing and for like if you need, how do I even describe it? It's a robot with little tiny like finger-like arms, and it's able to perform the same function repeatedly on a phone. So it can look like it acts like a human. Because like we now have tech that can detect when it is like a robot or a script that's just like, you can't like necessarily sign up for a dating app using a pre-written script because they try to add these like signs of life. You have to fill out the CAPTCHA. You have to do something that makes it seem like you're a human. But now they use machine vision and robotics to have a little like nubbin-tipped finger robot that and has like a computer brain that is able to then like pretend to be a person on an actual phone. And that way they have like the phone is real, the account is now considered real by the platform, but you have like a secret robot on the other end that's just doing all the messaging. And with AI now, it gets, what's that?
I said you were right. This is horrifying.
Oh no, it goes so deep because now like the AI can actually respond. At this point, the average like LLM, like the large language models that power these new AI, I would say it's more intelligent and intelligible than the bottom 80% of people that you'll encounter on the internet. Like the average person saying, hey, hi, what's up? Like that's a human most of the time, but an AI would actually send you a thoughtful sentence, and it can, at this point, respond to things in your profile. And so
yeah,
even when it's not a fake individual, it can actually be a real person these days, but you now have the ability to subscribe to AI bot assistants, which will do the messaging on your behalf, or you can do the ones that embed themselves in your keyboard. So as you're typing, you don't even have to type a message to someone anymore because like you see that they've started a conversation with you. You'll get to be able to choose whether you want your response to what they said to be romantic or sexy or friendly or casually indifferent, like, and then it'll just auto-generate a response based on what they said using the filter that you wanted to apply. And so even when it's a real person with potentially good intentions, it may still be an AI that's actually doing the talking. So at virtually every level of this, we have become so almost divorced from the heart of it, of like the actual, like I'm having a conversation with another living being. And, that's for better or worse, because one of the things that honestly I don't consider to be terrible about this situation is that because these dating apps failed us so horrifically by making it so that superficiality was king and that we never know if we're compatible, we just know if we're attracted, then all of the additional work of sussing out compatibility has basically been forced upon the end user at the level of these crappy back and forths you do across X number of dating platforms, across X number of hours, where you're just trying to go through the, hey, hi, what's up? How are you? Who are you? What's your deal? What are you up to this weekend? How was your week? Every single thing we have to then say, which is the interminable slog of like, I have to be interesting enough that they'll care to stay online and actually keep responding. I can't be too forward or they'll just peace out and unmatch me because I'm too creepy or like aggressive with them. And maybe they have a lot of other inbound attention, so they don't want me to be trying to monopolize it. But like, if I don't escalate somewhere, then they're just going to assume I'm not interested and therefore pass on me anyway or unmatch or just delete the app because someone else sent them a bad message. So there's just this horrible situation that almost every dater is in right now where you have to like be interesting, be interested, make something happen, but not too quickly. And also you still don't know if you're compatible. So you're trying to make a thing happen, but you have no conviction that this is meaningful to you or that the person even cares or that it's even someone you want to make something happen with. And that's before you even meet. And once we meet, we have all these like crappy mechanics of culture that tell us what we're supposed to be doing on a date, whether it's supposed to be romantic. And dating has completely gone down the shitter because it's if you're trying to do a romantic thing with someone who knows nothing about you, then it seems like you're putting on airs or putting forth expenses for no reason whatsoever. And basically, all of this happened because dating apps ceased trying to be compatibility-driven matchmaking engines where we were confident that the person we're on a date with is a good fit for us. Like, only really like one or two dating platforms still maintain compatibility-first algorithms where users have power to be able to say, this is important to me. I want to only find people who are my top matches given these variables. Like OkCupid's one of the few apps that still actually lets you set not just the preferences you have, but how important they are to you, and that would then reflect in the match percentages you see with people. There are no swipe-based apps that do that right now out of the thousands that exist. And so if they're not doing that, if they're not doing the compatibility work for you, you have to do it yourself in messaging and in meeting. And what that means is endless time spent wasted on back and forth messaging with people you don't care about or don't even know if you should care about, and then endless messaging with your own voice face to face with people you, once again, probably don't care about because they came to you through this random void. They'll probably be out the door tomorrow anyway, and you still don't know if you're compatible. And the work of finding that out it's interminable in length. You don't know how long it will take to know if this is actually someone who means well. If, yeah, you maybe had a good first date, but like, are they on 30 other apps and are never even going to follow up after this? Dating apps allowed us to be crappier to one another because there's always 10 million more people at our fingertips.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that because I actually have to read into the photographs now because the information isn't there for me. So I have to pick up little cues of compatibility, like did they go to art school? Do they have a funky color hair dye? Or like something to indicate that they would be like queer friendly. Maybe they don't know what ethically non-monogamous is, but maybe like some open-minded. If someone says they're open-minded, like I have to go on a little scavenger hunt, detective work with these apps now, I find.
Part of what's actually happened as a result of the lack of compatibility being signaled in a profile is that increasingly you will link to, could be your OnlyFans, could be your Instagram. Most popularly is your Instagram because there's like a very coherent and effective funnel that goes from dating app to Instagram where maybe someone's never going to reply to their matches because they have too many thousands on a dating app, but the people who actually feel really compatible will then go maybe follow them on Instagram and then maybe like their stories over the course of a couple days, weeks, or months. And then maybe thereafter respond to a prompt every once in a while if someone leaves an Instagram story where they ask a question. Maybe you'll get a mutual follow and realize that this person's now watching your stories. And you can learn a lot about someone's compatibility with you from their Instagram because it's where they're posting potentially things they're doing in life, things they're doing with their family, with their friends, with their pets, with themselves. It can be their tastes, if they're curating tastes. It could be their values, if their stories are talking about maybe their politics or their ethical values. And when you gain that information, that's like what you wanted the dating app to have all along, but they don't allow that unless they directly let you link your Instagram, which is only a couple apps right now. But what you can then do, you can follow, like they're not going to delete their Instagram at the same rate they're deleting their Tinder. And so you could follow up months later with a person you now know after 6 months of following them, like, oh, like we continue to be compatible. I continue to like your stories. I like what you're putting out. Would you ever want to meet? Like you can actually bridge that gap so much more readily after having already had this kind of baseline back and forth, following each other, looking at each other's stories over the course of a couple weeks or months, even days, but like more reliably. It's, if you escalate very quickly into someone's Instagram from a dating app and start messaging them to meet up, they might be like, what the hell are you doing? Why wouldn't you just message me on the app? This is too forward. This is not a space for that. And so I think it does take a little bit more of the back and forth where you actually start getting, like, once you see them looking at your stories, that's when you know that, like, okay, there might be a rapport forming here, or at least curiosity.
Where do you see the future? Where do we go from here? Does it get worse? Is there a fix? Is there something to kind of revert us back to focusing on pure compatibility? I'm curious what you think.
There's a possibility for a really good future here because AI are more powerful than we are at detecting so many different things, and they have access to so many more things than we do in the same span of time. Like it could take us hours to go through someone's social media backlog and find out like who the hell they are, what they're up, like what they're about, what kind of things they tweet about. Like I tried to go through my old tweets. I think I have like over 4,000. I made it through like 10 in an hour and was like, this is overwhelming. I can't even glean things about myself. Going back on my Instagram, I think I have like 5,000 posts. And so it's so much for a person to have to go through. And so what we can do now is just, or at least in the near future, we'll be able to have an AI say, go through these 10 people's, broad social indexes and find out like who is most compatible with me given these variables. And like, this doesn't have to even happen through a dating site. It can also just happen via an AI that is able to search the internet on your behalf. And so if you're able to better understand what makes you compatible with someone, or in the future, if an AI can do a better job than you can at predicting that, given you can just, like, there could be an app where it says, fill in the last 10 people you've dated and how you rated them across each different dimension. And then we'll find more people who fit the dimensions that you consider to be most important. OkCupid's best poised to do that because there's already so many compatibility questions that an average user may have answered, which is, this is well into the thousands of questions that are possible to be answered with weights appended to each one. So I think if more apps are able to capture more of that variability and more of those like user surfaced compatibility variables, then the AI will have a pretty easy job of going through that and actually telling us who we should match, who we should message, what we should say. Because at the end of the day, like the more important thing to us is not like how we got in front of the person, but that the right person is now walking alongside us, building a life together. Like I think we're willing to forgive a lot of the interstitial things in order to have the actual result we wanted in the first place. And that's also proven by, I can't tell you how many people approach me asking if I can just run all of their dating apps. They don't have to open a single thing. They just let me do all the messaging, all the things until they have a date in front of them, because all they really want to do is meet a real live person and have it be someone that they care to spend more than an hour with without wanting to rip their hair out. And that's a pretty universally shared thing. Like some people might prefer to have a little more agency in the process, but for the most part, if you could guarantee that if someone shows up at X place on X day and they're going to find someone who's 99% compatible with them, that's a pretty compelling offer. And I think AI can get us most of the way there and help eliminate the current chasm of frustration, which is currently embedded in this like crappy match, like the swipe to match bullshit at this point. It takes an app less than 100 swipes to know who you are attracted to. The idea that you'd then swipe tens of thousands more times telling them that you're, yes, still attracted to these kinds of people when they already knew that for days or months or years, and they're asking you to pay just to like surface more of the same, like that's not useful to us. And the messaging back and forth is not useful to us because it's us saying the same regurgitated shit day over day. That's why the AI came in. That's why we choose to use, like, to give them access to incredibly private things, like our whole keyboard, everything we're typing, our passwords, like that's just freely given over by so many people now to these AI that can just like help reduce some of that cognitive and attentional load in order to put the right person in front of us. And so I just feel like once the AI get there and the dating apps stop having their annoying business models get in the way of the basics of human connection, then we'll be in a much better place. But it's going to be at least another 1 to 2 years of the slog before, and then like the pushback against the AI feeling like it's everywhere. Because right now it's like that, if only some people are doing it, then it feels like only some people have this like secret leg up and you can't trust anyone because it could be anyone. Once it becomes normalized, and once it becomes understood that like there are good outcomes that can happen when we let more of the compatibility work be shunted to a system or service that's actually able to do that reliably, then we'll be in a better place. I'm not guaranteeing we'll get there under the current economic models.
And regulatory
yeah.
difficult in that aspect.
You mentioned a lot about like OkCupid. How about I've noticed that Field is doing some stuff with like education and teaching people more about hyperconsent and stuff like that. Do you have a take on what they've been doing lately?
There's always going to be benefits to educating users on like how not to die, not to do dangerous things, not to give away sensitive information, how to send messages to people that aren't crap, how to basically not waste everyone's collective time. And so like there is a role for education across the board, but I think the systems themselves are still completely messed up. Like Field still doesn't necessarily know who you're most compatible with, especially given the time frames for a lot of things that are tied to like the kink and poly scene. Like sometimes you need a poly, like a person to complete your quad for a hotel room gathering tonight, and you may not trust Field to deliver on that because it's not necessarily easy to signal how urgently you're looking for someone to fill this role.
We've used, I think, Tinder and Field, obviously, for quick ways to fill roles like that. But yeah, I was just curious if you had a greater take on them in general.
To a person who is still a real person using the apps, what do you suggest to kind of, because I feel like there are so many mistakes that people can make and how they present themselves, and so what would you say, okay, I'm getting on an app or look at my profile, what are your, I guess, takeaways, your advice for how to present yourself amidst all of these different horrors that are among us?
I think there's maybe 4 components here, and it goes at each level of like when and where you'll approach this problem. So the first level is what app do you choose? And so the first recommendation for me on that is if you know enough about yourself that you can make, like you've dated a bunch, you have a pretty good sense of the things you want and don't want, then you automatically like go to an app that lets you put in the things you've learned, that lets you bank on that knowledge. So an OkCupid, even a Match to a certain extent, you can put in more compatibility and preference variables. And so you're able to narrow down the field significantly based on what you know to be compatible with you. If you're using a Tinder when you know a lot about yourself, you may just end up wasting a ton of time because they're going to continuously show you people who are like at the attractive but not compatible. Like their goal is always attractive but not compatible, because then you stay on because it's going to keep being a little dopamine drip. The next level is what's going to, like, how do you ever get a match on any of these platforms? You have to have compelling photos at this point, because they're so photo driven across pretty much every dating platform around nowadays, unless it's like video based. But those really aren't taking off well because people are atrocious at filming themselves on video. And so it's just awkward all the time. It's the Vine problem, where Twitter introduced Vine, and then Vine was only used by like a very small percent of people who are actually creative. And then the rest of the people were like, I have no idea what I'm doing here. I look like an idiot. I'm just going to give up.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting. Not to cut you off, but like the photo video thing. So I just started getting more into still photography, doing boudoir stuff for Chelsea and other people who need adult content creation. And the way that I'm treated as a photographer, completely different than when I do video. Because when you're a photographer, you're invited in, you're part of the club, everyone's happy to see you. When I'm shooting video, they're like, don't take anything out of context. You're an enemy when you walk into the door. They're just afraid that you're going to fuck something up and make them look bad. And it's the idea that you have a more temporal medium that kind of expresses all the worst parts of you, all the awkward parts of you. But when you're a photographer, you're curated in such a way where they want to be part of your club, kind of. Anyway, just thought of that.
Yeah.
And
I don't want to like undercut your entire business, but I also have a general case to be made about photography and the need for having someone do your shoot. I think the way that I process like what makes sense for a dating app is you need your first photo to be the one that oozes you in the most like lovable. If someone's going to wake up next to you in bed and fall in love with you yet again, like that's kind of that photo. It's the one where someone is truly drawn into you and your story. They see your face, they see your eyes, they see you smiling, they see something that makes them say, wow, this is my kind of person. As soon as you have that, there's only like 2 more things that are relevant to think about for your photos. The next is like, do they have a sense of your overall body? Like how do you exist through space? Because someone will not just want to be attracted to your face, they want to be attracted to your whole package. And so like there's the face, there's the body, and then the rest of it is the life. Like what is the life you're actually living? Most people make the mistake of just putting more and more face shots, more body shots, and most of them are decontextualized. It's like you in a mirror where there's no other context of like what's happening behind you, what's happening around you. And so given that these platforms are so superficial, if you don't use the rest of this photo lineup, which can be as many as 10 or more photos, to capture your life, then all you're doing is giving people more of the same, more of your face. They're like, okay, I got that I was attracted to you. You're in my feed because I'm already likely to be attracted to you. And so adding more photos of you looking attractive is entirely wasteful Like, this is precious real estate. You have 5 to 10 photos that need to convey to someone the whole of what would make you compatible with them so that they could be confident in messaging you. And so for me, if you've gotten the face and the body shot out of the way, and like ideally that both of them also capture multiple dimensions of your life, every other photo is really just an opportunity for yet another dimension of your life to come through. How do you, like, what's your relationship to your family and your friends? What's your relationship to the world, the environment, the politics around you? Do you have any pets? Do you have any huge responsibilities that take up a lot of your life that someone should know about ahead of time? Every single one of those things should be a different photo, regardless of how attractive you look. What matters is that someone can see into these different domains of your life, especially if you know that these are important for compatibility, because in most apps, you can't signal that as a, like, I'm a care worker, so I'm spending a lot of my evenings taking care of the elderly, and therefore, we might not have a lot of available date days. But you can capture that in a photo and give someone a better sense of like, oh, that's where I could expect to see you in the wild.
Yeah, I do use images in place of words now because nobody will read the bio. So when I'm curating an image lineup, I have to say everything that I want to say in words, but now instead with images. I had my ex-partner, the one before Chelsea, she handed me her profile and said, I don't even know if, 'cause I met her at a bar, actually. It was one of the few people I've ever dated that I've met out in the wild. And she showed me her Hinge bio and said, I don't think if we met, we would have never met on Hinge because my profile is so boring. I'm like, well, you know that. And I'm not going to tell you, oh, it's not boring. And I looked at it. I'm like, I would have not swiped on this profile because there is nothing for me to comment on here. You've given me nothing. And then she complains about getting terrible dates with men. I'm like, yes, because the only people who are going to say something are going to just want to hit you up for sex immediately. You've given guys who are thoughtful and considerate nothing to go off of. There's no information here for me to respond to. So I was honest. I was like, yeah, I don't think I would have swiped on your bio.
Yeah, that's pretty standard. And also the person I'm dating right now, like I've seen her Hinge, and no, I would have probably written her off like one line in. And it's because these platforms don't set us up for success. They don't set us up to find our actually compatible people. It takes a lot of work. And that's like part of like the artfulness and finessing of my work with people at the individual level, where we have to find out like who is the kind of person you actually want to attract here. Because being generically attractive and putting up a lot of like low-hanging fruit in the form of like cleavage shots could be an easy way to get matches, but it's not a good way to get like people who you care to actually speak to once you have to converse with them either online or face-to-face. And so my goal is usually, if you assume an app has 50 million users, you want to go on maybe 10 dates before finding someone you can be in some kind of a meaningful relationship with. Some people might say I'd rather it be 2 dates, 3 dates, but like even 10 to 50 dates, you still have to eliminate 49 million people in order to go on those 10 compatible dates. And so I want people to recognize that like your profile doesn't have to generically attract people. It has to make millions of people say absolutely not, that's not my person, so that the algorithms can finally get that there's only a couple people that are really good for you. And so my goal is always like get many, many, many no's in order to have the couple yeses be ones where you'll immediately say, oh, I understand why this was a yes. There's enough here to work with that I'm now excited to take this to the next level. And so my next like level of advice is beyond the photo. This is now in the profile. Anything your photos don't capture. The average person has like crap photos for the most part. It's hard to get photos at critical dimensions of your life. Like if you're a metal worker, who's going to take the photos of you when you're holding a blowtorch? Like you have to have a friend show up with you. It's hard to get, and it takes time for those kinds of photos to accumulate, because it's not like you're just going to bring a friend and have them shadow you for a week to take photos of your life. Maybe some people have friends like that, but the average person maybe doesn't even have that many friends. So we're in a situation where the photos are hard to surface, and then we have to rely on the profile to do a lot of work. And that's, hoping that people even read your profile, obviously. But for me, there's so many different little profile elements that can make it a little bit easier to capture compatibility. Like if you pick the 10 words that are most you, think of words that you will say more frequently than the average person. It could be your interests that are kind of weird, and especially if they intersect in weird ways. All of those things that make you more unique. My goal in any profile writing scenario is, if we took away all your photos and presented a group of random profiles to your friends, would they immediately know yours? Like it should be blindingly obvious to people who know you that this is your profile. And if it's not, then you haven't done the work yet. Like you have to have That's in my opinion. Like if you want to succeed on online dating, you have to have a profile that oozes you through every pore, every single letter, every word. The humor comes through. Your like different components that might make someone compatible with you. Like you should be able to acknowledge your relationship constellation if you're poly, so people know what they're getting themselves up for. What kind of near and future term things you're hoping for in life. It could be just like baseline goals you're hoping to achieve this year that someone could say, oh, I'm actually looking to do that too. Like, let's get together and join forces. Or it could be longer term things about, if you're looking for kids, you probably should note that so that someone who absolutely is not looking for that doesn't end up wasting the next 6 months of your life, because it's really easy to fall in love with people and it's really hard to stay in love and stay compatible. Like humans are wired to fall in love. We have mirror neurons that are operating even when we're not aware, telling us, oh, we're like before we even know we're attracted to someone, our face is already mimicking them because it's desperately trying to seek connection and validation from those around us. And so we're predisposed to fall in love, to fall for people, but we're also not great at knowing whether they're the right people for us.
Yeah, those are very nice things that you said, but on most of the profiles, it's like, if you're not over 6 foot, don't talk to me, size queen here.
Yeah.
I'm looking for a person of this race. Like, there are, saying that you're poly or not is something that, like, okay, prepare someone for getting into something like that. But I think it's just so much less than that.
Most profiles out there, I'd say 95+% of profiles are utter garbage that get us no closer to knowing compatibility. And once again, you have to be comfortable with wholesale eliminating 95+% of the population of any app in order for you to find someone who you give a shit about. On most apps, if you had chosen an app where you could just filter down to people who are 99% compatible, given you've already put forth all of the additional compatibility variables into the algorithm, then yes, you don't have to worry about that to the same extent.
How does anyone outside of New York City even meet anybody? Like, a small town USA?
It's hard. It's terrible.
Yeah.
I had a client in Seattle even. Seattle's not I think it's like under 1 million people, but it's still,
We know what Seattle is.
more than 200,000 people. The client had same profile, no changes, just moved from Seattle to New York, and their match rate went up 10x overnight.
I asked on our Instagram account, like, hey, if you have any questions, please let me know. And I did get in an inbox from a couple people being like, hey, can Steve look at my profile? And I didn't even get that far into reading down when they're like, oh, well, I live in Central Jersey. It could just be a Central Jersey thing. Like, people in New York City, they have to ask what train line you live off of. If you say like something like, oh, I live in Jersey City, Washington Heights, Astoria, those are trigger words for a lot of people when they're looking for to date someone.
Yeah, it's the number of transfers that matter.
Yeah. Fair enough. I don't even know how to meet people in real life either. Like, it's like the apps are not good, as you've said, in so many different ways. And then the thought of actually having to go out and meet somebody in an organic way is just exhausting.
So I'll get to that.
I could talk to you all day. Please come back and talk more with me because this is so fascinating.
Anytime.
Yeah, keep talking, get stuff.
Okay. Yes.
But thank you so much, and please come back because I could talk to you for hours about this stuff.
Yeah, this is my lifeblood. It's been part of my life for almost 15 years. So
I love
literally
it.
anytime.